How is fear represented in The Woman in Black? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night needing to go to the toilet but holding it in because you didn't want to go out in the dark? This is fear, and it is a commonly occurring concept during the Woman in Black novel and the Woman in Black movie. The Woman in Black is a gothic horror novel written by Susan Hill that was published in 1982. In 2012, director James Watkins released a film adaptation. The focus of the seminar is to analyse how the concept of fear is represented in both the novel and the movie. Along with this, focus on how the different mediums, novel and film, use narrative and cinematic techniques respectively to convey the concept. Fear is represented in both texts, however the movie uses carefully selected film techniques such as sound effects, camera angles and acting to achieve this, whereas the book uses carefully selected literary devices such as pacing, repetition and vivid descriptive imagery. Director James Watkins uses a variety of film techniques throughout the Woman in Black movie, such as sound effects and camera angles, in order to display the concept of fear in the film. There are two examples I've taken out of the movie which display fear. Firstly, at the 0.55 to 1 minute and 20 second mark where the three girls jumped off the roof, and secondly, at the 16 minute 30 second mark to the 19 minute 5 second mark where Arthur Kipps first arrives and explores the Elmarsh house. In the scene where the three girls jumped off the roof, the first cinematic technique used were the sound effects. Sound effects such as faint, unsettling background music which slowly builds up and intensifies until the climax, where the girls jumped off the roof, were used. Along with this, the unsettling sound of toys running plays in the background. These examples demonstrate fear due to the sudden supernatural change in their behaviour, and the music carries along with it. The second cinematic technique used were the camera angles. The scene begins with the camera panning out, showing the three girls dropping their toys, standing up, walking in a perfect choreographed and unnatural way. After this, the camera then goes to a close-up of the three girls' blank and no expression faces. These examples show that a supernatural force is controlling the girls whether they like it or not. In the scene where Arthur Kipps first arrives at Elmarsh's house, the first cinematic technique used were the sound effects. Sound effects such as ambient noises like howling winds and the sound of creaking wood creates a sense of unknown. The second cinematic technique used were the camera angles. The camera zooms into an empty shot of the Elmarsh's house in the middle of nowhere, showing isolation, and zooms out of the house where it is run down, dirty and dark, preparing the audience for the unknown. In conclusion, through the use of cinematic techniques such as sound effects, camera angles, director James Watkins creates a strong sense of fear throughout the Woman in Black movie. Author Susan Hill uses a variety of narrative devices throughout the Woman in Black novel, such as vivid imagery and pacing, in order to display the concept of fear in the Woman in Black novel. There are two examples I've taken out of the book which display fear. Firstly, early in the book when Arthur Kipps is on his journey to Elmarsh's house, and in chapter 10 when Arthur Kipps and Arthur first encounters the Woman in Black. In the part of the book where Arthur is on his journey to Elmarsh's house, the narrative technique used was imagery. The author uses vivid imagery to describe Elmarsh's house and the surrounding area of Elmarsh's in order to create a sense of isolation and dread. An example of this being used in the book is when Arthur walks through the marsh. Hill describes the landscape as being forbidding and ghostly. A quote from the book reads, "The marshes were shifting, whispering, almost steaming in the bright sun, and yet there was no breeze." This quote from the book provokes fear, due to the fear of the unknown and emptiness. In chapter 10, when Arthur Kipps encounters the Woman in Black, the narrative techniques used was suspense through pacing. The author slowly builds up and intensifies her scenes, leaving the reader on edge. For example, when Arthur investigates noises or suspicions, the tension slowly builds up and the sense of fear grows. An example of this is, "I heard the noise again, more distinct, but still faint. And now I heard mingling with it another sound, one that seemed to be closer to me." These narrative techniques provide vivid imagery and repetition. This allows Susan Hill to create a sustained sense of fear and suspense throughout the novel, immersing the reader in Arthur's haunting experiences. In conclusion, through the use of narrative techniques such as imagery and pacing, author Susan Hill creates a strong sense of fear throughout the Woman in Black novel. Director James Watkins uses a variety of cinematic techniques throughout the Woman in Black novel, such as throughout the Woman in Black movie, such as acting, camera angles, and sound effects. And author Susan Hill uses the narrative technique repetition. There is one example I've taken out of the movie. This example is around the 50-minute mark where Arthur encounters the faces of all the dead children. And there is One example I've taken out of the novel. This example is around chapter 10. When Arthur encounters the woman in black multiple times. At the 50-minute mark, when Arthur encounters all the children, the first cinematic technique used was acting. Acting was used in a way that the children showed genuine fear, which gives the viewers an understanding of how genuinely petrified the children were, creating a sense of dread. The second cinematic technique used were the camera angles. The camera angle zooms into the kids' faces, was used in order for the audience to get a clear view of the kids' terrified faces. The third cinematic technique used was sound effects, with the use of the children's gentle and quiet whispers and gasps for air in contrast with the environment, makes their fear and the viewer's fear even more palpable. In the chapter where Arthur encounters the woman in black multiple times, the first narrative technique used was repetition. Repetition was used during the novel so the woman in black disappeared and reappeared again multiple times, creating a sense of dread. This sensation is described in the novel as feeling supernatural and disturbing. A quote from the book reads, she was looking directly at me. Her eyes seemed to burn with a fire of their own, and wistful and uncomfy. When Arthur encounters her again, the repetition of her appearance symbolises the terror linked to her. Her figure embodies fear and tragedy. In conclusion, through the use of cinematic techniques such as acting, camera angles, and sound effects, and through the use of narrative devices such as repetition, author Susan Hill and director James Watkins create a strong sense of fear throughout the movie and the book. Fear is represented in both texts. However, the movie uses carefully selected film techniques such as sound effects, camera angles, and acting to achieve this. Whereas the book uses carefully selected literary devices such as pacing, repetition, and vivid description imagery. Through the use of the examples I've given throughout my speech, I can confidently conclude that author Susan Hill and director James Watkins have done an amazing job in demonstrating fear throughout both versions of The Woman in Black. What was that time?